Hello, my beautiful doves. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Mina, and today I'm actually a little nervous because we know how YouTube likes to censor content, and today I am going to be talking about the show. I thought it'd be a good opportunity to revisit the show because I literally just revisited it while binging the third season. There will be some spoilers, nothing too crazy, just some general things. I'll be abbreviating the show name to SE. On occasion, I'll also be using the word snacks instead of sex for some of what I'm saying because I'm just trying to navigate around censorship issues, which is ironic given the topic of today's video. So let's get into the show review, aka listen to me try to convince y'all to watch the show if you haven't already. The show was created by Lori Nunn. It mainly centers around the teenage boy Otis and a single sex therapist mom played by the beautiful, lovely, amazing, spectacular Gillian Anderson, who I love very much as a former X-Files fan. It takes place in the UK, but Lori has talked about how she wanted the school to feel like a fusion between British and American schools, but I'll get to that in a little bit. In the first season, Otis and his friend Maeve decide to run an informal sex clinic for students who need help navigating that area of their lives, but are too afraid to get professional help from adults. Otis takes a lot of notes from his mom's work, and honestly, the way that he talks to some of the students is kind of camp because, I don't know, I just didn't know any high school boys when I was that age who were emotionally mature enough to talk about these topics.
Before you talk to Steve, you should probably figure out what works for you and your body.
So you're prescribing a wank?
But for the purposes of the plot and for the purposes of the messaging, we will allow it. We will just assume that Jean is just that good of a mom.
If you're going to do drugs tonight, remember to buddy up.
Mum!
And look after one another. Let me get you some condoms.
So, thanks, Mum.
My favorite part about the show is that even though there are a clear set of main characters, all the side characters get amazing, well fleshed out storylines. All the villains also get background stories to explain why they've ended up being the kinds of people that they are. And in that regard, I think this show is just a really sympathetic show. It doesn't just go, oh, this teacher is a bad father. No, we get this teacher is mean to his son because his father was a bully, and he's just passing down that trauma because he wasn't ever taught how to deal with it appropriately. I love that so much of this show is just about pushing for people to go to therapy or, at least talking about their problems and opening up and getting involved in self-healing practices. And so even the villainous characters, they're not treated as just like these one-dimensional villains. They're treated as people who just genuinely need help. At the beginning of the show, I hated this character, Adam, for being homophobic and being a bully. And then they showed his home life. They showed him struggling.
You won't be laughing when you throw yourself off a motorway bridge at the age of 35 because of the failure you have become.
And it started to make a lot of sense why he was the way that he was. And by the end of the first season, I found myself rooting for Adam. I wanted him to succeed in life. I was super invested in his journey. This show teaches empathy. It teaches you that just because someone is a dick doesn't mean they're a dick for no reason. And of course, if you were personally victimized by anyone, you have every right to forgive or to not forgive that person. But as a third party watching all these different dramatic scenes unfold in front of me, it really got me to thinking about my own privilege. And when I say privilege, I don't mean just financially. I mean the fact that I had amazing parents, loving parents growing up, the fact that I have always been able to make friends in every place that I've ever lived in, the fact that I grew up in a blue state, in a very liberal community. And of course, I don't always get things right every time. I'm still learning, but it's just the fact that all these privileges have afforded me a foundation that has made it easier for me to learn and grow and listen to other people. There's just a lot that goes into it, a lot of things that we don't think about when we're pointing fingers at other people. And this is getting kind of deep, so I'm gonna cut it short in a little bit, but I don't know, I feel like watching this show, it's kind of aided me along in this personal journey to become more open-minded and to be non-judgmental towards people who are just plain ignorant. As long as we don't have our own personal stake in it, I think it's a lot easier to take on this responsibility to be more nurturing and more understanding, because I think that ends up helping to grow and develop a better community in the long run. But this is getting really deep, as I said. So I just wanted to share how I feel like this show made a personal impact on me based on how it treats its characters. I also feel like when shows don't flesh out their side characters very well, it can lead to issues like tokenism, which Essie doesn't do despite being a very diverse show. The cast includes dark-skinned Black characters, brown characters, disabled characters, immigrants, non-binary characters, fat characters, a biracial character, gay, lesbian, bi, and pan characters, lower income characters, foster families, a mom battling drug addiction, etc., etc. There's a full spectrum of people, which is great, but I am always skeptical about representation for the sake of optics. So just because a show is diverse doesn't mean it's completely in the clear for me. I will admit that when I was getting into the first episode, I was really concerned when they introduced Eric, Otis's gay Black best friend. I was thinking immediately, oh my God, I hope he doesn't end up just being a token character. I hope he's not just there to throw in some sassy lines or to show that Otis is not a bigot by being friends with him. And in the end, I was pleasantly surprised. Everything about him felt so real and authentic and natural. The writers weren't just shoving in queer slang in places that didn't make sense. And none of the characters make a spectacle of him either. There's a lot of queer characters in the show, and they all act differently from one another to make sure that there are no stereotypes being pushed in. The writers also go into Eric's backstory with his relationship with his parents, and we really follow along his journey in coming to terms with who he is and who he wants to be. In the third season, we even follow him to Nigeria, where his mom is originally from, for his cousin's wedding. I also love how they normalize queerness. Obviously, some characters are more comfortable in their identity than others, but that's fine because that's realistic. But I like how, for instance, it's not sensationalized that this kid has two moms, or that this person is a bottom, or that these girls are just hooking up on campus. I think it's really helpful to show aspects of queerness as just aspects and not something weird or different. The other thing I really like about the show is just the essence of what it is. It's about teaching responsible sex ed to teenagers. And I talked about this in my The Problem with Teen Dramas video, but long story short, I am very uncomfortable by teen snack scenes because I just feel like they're not handled responsibly. They're very over glamorized and shot in a very pornographic way. So yeah, I don't vibe with it. And don't get me wrong, this show is really, really graphic. You see full vagine, full peignoir in the opening shots alone, but I don't have a problem with it. And the reason is because the way that they direct it, the way that they write it, shows these teens, navigating through awkwardness and new experiences and figuring out their bodies, which I think is very important.
Go get live with the honey. Rolling. I saw this girl when she was pumping.
It also explores queer snacks, safe practices, insecurities, fun fantasies, just the really raw and unfiltered realities which are often neglected in TV shows because they're just not glamorous enough.
He was moving his fingers like he was dialing a 1920s telephone, but really fast.
No, I feel like they were just really trying to do a good job to show real experiences to help real teenagers watching and to help parents understand their teenagers. The relationships that the characters have with each other are just so genuinely beautiful. I love Jean and Otis's relationship. I love how she kind of pushes these difficult conversations onto him, or at least difficult to the minds of teenagers, right? Because what teenage boy wants to talk to his mom about?
I've noticed you've been taking very long showers lately. Now, I know that the bathroom is a safe environment in which to enjoy oneself.
But yeah, I honestly, I love all the parents' relationships with their kids. I love to watch parents try to connect with their children instead of just giving them iPads, which I feel like is what we see all the time now. I love Otis's and Eric's friendship, how much they hug and cry with each other. I think that's really important for teenage boys to see.
Can you not see that we are very upset here?
It's fine.
Go away, right now. Get out of here!
I love how Amy's girl peers support her and ride the bus with her because she has PTSD from the bus. I really love this show. I really wish I had it growing up, and I think it's the best teen show to exist, which sounds like a bold statement, especially coming from me who doesn't watch that many teen dramas to begin with, but I just can't imagine a better show existing. It's responsible, it's funny, it's heartwarming. it captures both the negative and the positive experiences of being young really well. I love how the show prioritizes education, like safety, discussion. It dismantles shame. It encourages kids to talk to their peers, to talk to their family members. It's a really good show. And I really, really hope as many young people watch it as possible. Okay, now that I've said my piece, I feel like I just went on this like total rant, but I just genuinely love the show so much. And my love for it is so raw right now because I just finished binging the 3rd season. But yeah, let's get into the costumes. You waited long enough. I do want to say the spoilers will be getting a little bit heavier for this part, so be aware of that. Also, the costume designer for this show is Rosa Diaz. As I said earlier, the setting for the show is pretty nondescript because the school itself is like a fusion between American and British school aesthetics, and then the kids don't actually wear like anything that's in style for teens now today. I usually would be annoyed by that, but I am not for this show because the teens are still dressed like teens. They're just very colorful. They're just very youthful. And also, I can appreciate that the show is going for this like nondescript time period, which explains why there are a lot of retro influences in both the production and the costumes as well. In general, I just like that consistency. I feel like if you're gonna blend the way that the school looks, you have some leniency to blend what the costumes look as well. As Eliza Brooks writes in the Financial Times, while the presence of smartphones indicates that sex education is rooted in contemporary life, students at the fictional Moordale Secondary School pull from different decades with joyful abandon, with some wearing 1970s style lapels and others 1980s-esque blazers or 1990s grunge. The overall look, which costume designer Rosa Diaz describes as timeless and non-specific, makes the world of Essie feel both familiar and strange, which sums up the experience of being a teenager pretty well. Basically, I can deal with anachronism if there's a reason. But let's talk about some of the main characters. Jean Milburn is a total MILF. I love her. She's probably, maybe, my favorite character. I don't know yet. I love all the characters. She is arguably the best dressed on the show.
I covet your pantsuits.
Oh.
Even though I probably wouldn't wear anything that she wears myself, I like how she sticks to an earthy, tropical, jewel-toned color palette. She wears a lot of patterned, flowy silhouetted garments and wedges, which I usually can't stand, but it works for her and her bohemian wardrobe. It also works because, unlike Addison Rae's character in He's All That, who is also wearing wedges, Jean Milburn is not a rising TikTok star. She doesn't need to follow any trends. She looks very smart, but also still very relaxed. The bright colors and the looseness give vacation wear, but the tailoring and the collars speak professional. It's exactly who she is. She's calm, she's cool, but she's also intelligent and accomplished. Even though the colors she wears are vibrant, they're jewel toned, like I said, which gives her an air of maturity than, if she was just wearing primary colors or neon. In the 3rd season, Jean is pregnant. Rosa explained that for Jean's maternity wear, she still wanted Jean to look stylish and to look like herself. She said, I didn't want her to suddenly start wearing things that weren't her. There's this notion that when women fall pregnant, suddenly they just start wearing comfortable clothes and they lose their style and become sort of all mumsy. There's a real thing about that in terms of when people get pregnant and then after they've had babies. And I'm like, no, that doesn't have to happen. It really doesn't. I love that ethos. We really don't respect the beauty of mothers and older women enough, particularly in the West. Otis is a regular straight teenage boy. He wears mostly striped shirts and a jacket that he's religiously worn in almost every episode since season 1.
I said don't wear your jacket. People might recognize you.
It makes sense. We've all had that overworn favorite jacket in high school. I think mine was maybe a bomber jacket. I don't really remember. I try to block out as many high school memories as possible. But that's another thing I love about the show. The characters outfit repeat all the time. They wear the same clothing pieces all the time because they're high schoolers. Like, they don't have this crazy amount of disposable income to just throw at clothing. And also in Otis's and Maeve's case, for instance, because I noticed these two characters repeat their outfits like really often. It makes sense because Otis is a teenage boy who doesn't care about fashion. Why would he want more than like 10 shirts? And Maeve, she doesn't have a lot of money, so it makes sense that she doesn't own as many clothes as her rich friend Amy, for instance. Otis's horizontal striped shirts remind me of the 80s, and this is definitely purposeful. In general, there's a lot of 80s-esque aesthetic choices made for the show. The creator, Laurie Nunn, said that she herself was a fan of John Hughes films, and his work helped crystallize her scripts. The director, Ben Taylor, said, "There was a tone in the script that was about warmth and positivity. It was just sort of rendering the school experience as a positive thing, which we tend not to do in the UK. We wanted to have a school that was big enough and imposing enough that you could believe Otis was an invisible character in the school, which again tends to be a more American high school style." And Laurie said, "We want this to also capture the feeling that teenagers can be out all day on their bike, not on technology, not being checked up on by helicopter parents, and I think that's maybe a thing of the past. I think that nostalgic feeling helps the show feel timeless and helps us connect to audiences of all ages, not just 16 and 17-year-olds. I totally understand what Laurie's saying. I feel like high school movies from the 80s and 90s feel way more nostalgic than high school shows of today. Even though my high school was, a totally different experience from, say, The Breakfast Club or Ferris Bueller, there is something universal about kids wanting to ditch school or being in cliques or getting ready for prom or going to detention or just the sights of rows and rows of yellow lockers. I also feel like a lot of teen dramas these days hire like the most attractive actors possible versus before. They opted for like more realistic, average looking characters. No offense to any of the actors on there, but you know what I mean. They're not like over glamorized with ripped 6-pack abs. It was a different vibe. And having Otis embody the feeling that Laurie wanted to invoke in the show was an important move because he is the main character. I think he's definitely dressed the most stereotypical of what we remember those 80s and 90s high school shows and movies to be like. His simple striped t-shirts and jeans make me think of Freaks and Geeks, Saved by the Bell, That 70s Show, Square Pegs. Of course, he's not wearing like high-waisted jeans or suspenders or anything too vintage because it is a contemporary show, but the elements are there. Even his bike helmet gives a retro feeling compared to Eric's, which is way more modern. But let's talk about Eric. Like I said, Eric is gay, and he's also Ghanaian Nigerian. He wears bright colors, clashing patterns, and glittering makeup on occasion. He's had a really good development journey so far, despite his habit of kissing other guys when he's in a relationship, but he's learning, I hope. Just want the best for him. He wears vibrant 80s-esque patterns in monochromatic outfits and fun hats. He's also extremely charismatic, bright, and gives off major golden retriever energy. So the wardrobe makes so much sense.
I think we should get drunk with your dad.
Can you smell the wild garlic, Eric?
Yes, I can, Remy! Yes, I can!
He does get assaulted, and after that happens, he does withdraw. He starts wearing really dull-colored, boring outfits because he's coping, and he doesn't feel safe anymore being who he is. Then after talking to an older black gay man who looks so cool, so fashionable and confident, he feels inspired and ready to once again embrace who he is. For prom, he puts on glittery eyeshadow all over his face, metallic lipstick, mascara, and puts on these really funky earrings that are definitely inspired by the man he talked to. He also wears a Ghanaian kente suit and a gele, which is a traditional Nigerian head wrap to represent his cultures.
I would say this is like the piece de resistance. Snatched at the waist, gave enough room for the cakes. From normcore all the way to African Butterfly, this is the emotional journey of Eric season 1.
I wore an Aozai to my senior year homecoming, and I felt very empowered by that, so I totally understand where Eric is coming from. His family is religious, and in season 3, when he goes to Nigeria, they do say that it is illegal to be gay there. But rather than shunning his religion and his country, he learns a way to still feel connected to those aspects of himself while still loving who he loves. And I love that they added that storyline in because identity is really so complex, especially when you're at multiple intersections. Throughout the seasons, you can see how much he comes into himself with the way his outfits start looking a little bit more coordinated, but still bolder and more colorful than before. And by season 3, he also starts wearing makeup more regularly. Maeve, the last character I want to go in depth with, has a look that is very grunge, kind of goth. She wears leather jackets, plaid, and the color black. She's definitely a victim of the rhetoric that dyed hair equals delinquency, so she does dye her hair back to its natural color when she's appealing to the school board to let her return to school after getting suspended in season 2. Maeve is incredibly smart. She's one of the smartest kids in school, but she lacks the money to do a lot of things because of her mom's addiction.
You should definitely apply. Gifted, talented. That's all you, baby.
Yeah, well, I can't afford it, so.
And because of that, in the first season especially, she starts off as being very closed off. She has this attitude. She doesn't really care about trying too hard or having that many good things on her CV because she just doesn't see a future for herself. However, throughout the season, with gentle encouragement from her teacher, her friends, her neighbor, she starts to take her future by the reins and even goes off to study abroad in America for a gifted and talented program. That is a huge change from the beginning of the series when she reluctantly is made part of the Quiz Heads team. Minus the forced hair changes, I like how she retains her look for the most part throughout the show. Visually, she represents such a clear, quote-unquote, bad kid archetype that we've been accustomed to seeing in the media, so I like how her character subverts those tropes. Ben said in an interview with GQ, so you've got intentionally these characters that you think you understand on first glance, but when you dig deeper, you start to understand more about them. Laurie said in the same interview, the show is so much about taking those very tried and tested character tropes and finding a new way of looking at them and flipping them on their head. Everybody knows what a jock jacket represents because we've all seen those films. You know the character, and then we don't have to do that much work to then dig deeper into what really makes him tick. Similar to Maeve, we have Jackson, who wears a Letterman varsity jacket and is the head boy and best swimmer at the school. But of course, he's not just a jock. He's open-minded, he has anxiety, he stands up for his friends, he doesn't actually like swimming as much as people think he does. Ruby dresses like a maximalist and has an abrasive personality to mask the fact that she's having a tough time at home with her dad's MS diagnosis. Lily wears space buns, dresses in fun pastels, and wears colorful makeup because she loves all things aliens. Ola wears a ton of rainbow flag colors and even shows up to prom in a tuxedo to express her queerness. As you can see, the characters' wardrobes tell you so much about who they are. And this is why it's so crazy and so good story-wise for them to get rid of the costumes and force these kids to wear the most drab, gray school uniforms when the new head teacher, Hope, starts working at the school. Hope's entire ethos is having her students undistracted and controlled. She implements a strict dress code and repaints the entire school to give it this very sterile, very lifeless look. It comes as a real shock because the school was so colorful. The way the students dress was so colorful. You can visually see how awful and how controlling Hope's Umbridge-esque reign is. She literally sucks out the vibrancy of the whole school. I'm personally not against school uniforms. Like, I understand there are pros and cons. For the pros, I can understand how school uniforms can diminish class differences and remove this pressure to conform to a specific look to be popular. Maybe I'm just traumatized because I never had a Juicy Couture tracksuit or a pair of Uggs that all my friends had, but it's fine. But on the con side, a really important point is that school uniforms tend to be heavily gendered, with girls dressing in skirts and boys dressing in pants. And this season, they actually introduced a non-binary character, Cal, who challenges the system by wearing a baggy boys uniform every day, despite Hope's transphobic nagging.
Boys in this classroom and girls in this classroom, but I'm non-binary.
In the story, uniforms represent stifling creativity and identity. And in the season finale, they dropped a huge bomb, and I just cannot wait to see what happens for season 4. I might continue reviewing the show as the series progresses, depending on whether or not I can come up with new things to say about it. Okay, everyone, that's all I have for today. Thank you so much for watching, listening. Please go watch the show. I have never plugged harder for a
Netflix show
in my entire life. It will be worth your time. But let me know in the comments what you think about SE and whether you have other show recommendations for me that you know that my bar is literally this high. And I'll see you next time. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Bye-bye.